Oh, hi there.
Hello. This is great.
Yeah, nice to have you over.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to see you again. This is great.
Yeah, coming out of the woodwork. But I wanted to talk to you about your time as mayor. I mean, you have been mayor since 2014, seen this city through some pretty extraordinary changes when you think about it. Major economic investment, you got the battery plant, a pandemic, major infrastructure projects, housing crisis, growing concerns about homelessness and downtown Windsor. So, we know that an election is coming up. So let's talk about your history as mayor. And let me take you back several years to your 2018 inaugural address. At your swearing in, when you talked about your biggest fear rather than your biggest hopes, your biggest fear for Windsor, and really about what keeps you up at night. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, that was just on the heels. It's a great question because I had started writing the inaugural address. And when I reflect on what I was writing, I was probably 3/4 of the way done. And it was the type of speech you could really give to any mayor in any city around the planet.
Yeah.
They could change the name of the city and probably deliver the speech and it might be appropriate. It was a bit of a rah-rah speech. But what happened as I was writing that, GM announced the closure of the plant in Oshawa. And I said, what the heck happens in Windsor if Stellantis makes a similar decision? What does it mean for our community? And I hit delete on the speech and I said, I need to have a frank conversation with the community. We need to have a bit of a rallying call and a bit of a wake up, that we need to work together on bigger plans to make sure that we secure the future of the city. And so the speech that I delivered, for some people, they said, I wasn't anticipating that. And it was meant to be that wake-up call to say, guys, what happens to Windsor if Stellantis does what GM did in Oshawa? What would we do? And so let's not wait for that moment. Let's prepare and make sure that our community is resilient,
Yeah.
that we've got plans in place that we will be able to shock absorb that type of decision should it come to our community. And that set us on a path. That set us on the path to get Windsor Works done. That set us on the path to go out and get a battery factory and put all sort of, as a casino city, put all chips in the middle. And we're going to secure one of these battery factories because that's the way the world is moving. That's certainly the way the United States and Canada were moving at that
Right.
particular time. And voila, with a lot of effort on the city side, a lot of effort on ACDEV side, the province, the federal government, and Stellantis, we were able to secure Canada's first electric vehicle battery manufacturing facility.
So it is a group effort, but how important do you think it is for a mayor to be directly involved, to have a seat at the table, to travel internationally?
Well, listen, I remember in 2014, my speech when I announced that I was running, I said, I will go anywhere, I will do anything required to make sure that this city succeeds. And you can never underestimate the power when the mayor of the community walks into a room and has a discussion with investors about what is on offer, what the city can deliver, the talent pipeline that's available, it brings it all together. And there is whoever the mayor is, there is the power of the mayor walking into a room with other executives to say, we're serious about this, that I took enough time out of my schedule to be here to make sure we can get this over the finish line. And we've had great success with that approach.
So has Windsor diversified enough? Or will we always be automotive connected?
I don't think we're ever going to fully get away from our roots, from what we're good at, from our bread and butter. We have built over the course of more than 100 years. I mean, Ford started here in Windsor in 1904. And since that time, we have built strong and deep roots in tool, die, and mold, in manufacturing, of course, in automotive. That's why we're the automotive capital of Canada, because of Ford putting a footprint here in 1904. And so we're never going to get away from that. And we need to figure out how we can spin off of that. And I think today the conversation's really interesting that the federal government is leaning into defense. And we have some expertise and we are a powerhouse in that field and certainly can be. It's a matter of pivoting our expertise, our local manufacturing expertise, to be able to deliver on the needs of our federal government. And then we've done it in the past. You think of the world wars and how automotive plants adapted to produce things that the government needed of the day to help support the war effort. We know we can do that. It's just a matter of making sure that we get the right people around the table, the ones with the skill sets, the ones that can get in front of the decision makers, because you do have to go through some hoops to position yourself as a defense manufacturer. But with zero shadow of a doubt, this community is amongst the most well-positioned communities in our country to be able to take advantage of the defense manufacturing pivot that is happening here federally and frankly globally.
Let's talk about housing for a minute. You've made housing a priority. The city's Housing Solutions Made for Windsor initiative has been turning municipal properties into development opportunities. Most recently, W.D. Lowe. You were talking about Karen Avenue, Palliser, Roseland. Do you think Windsorites care about the actual number of housing units that get approved, or do you think they just want an affordable place for their kids to live?
100% they want affordability. And I think of my own kids who are 24 and 22, one is getting married this month and certainly, we'll be looking for a home. And it's sort of that dream that we all had when we were that age as Windsorites. We knew we could get a home for $150,000, maybe even cheaper as a starter home. And you knew that if two people were working, you'd be able to save up that down payment in fairly short order and then be able to move into your own home. And I know, and we all know, that equation has dramatically changed throughout our country and frankly continentally, where the average price of a home here, it's little solace when you say to Windsorites, we're actually a really affordable community. The average price of a home is like $500,000. They say, well, that's not affordable. I agree, that's not, but thank God we don't live elsewhere in Ontario or Canada where that number is staggeringly much higher. And so we have done a lot of work. I was going to say all we can, but I would never say that. There's always more we can do, and our mind is always open to figuring out how we can help solve this affordability challenge. People know, smart people know, we don't build housing. The city itself doesn't build housing, but we create the framework that we hope the development community will then pick up the sticks and start building housing on sites. And so when I think of Housing Solutions Made for Windsor, we looked at and repurposed all municipally owned land that we have that we figured would make a dent in creating more supply, having the development community come in, get these properties, build more housing with the notion that there needs to be an equalization of supply and demand. And if prices of homes are $500,000 and there's a run on a $500,000 house, we need more inventory, we need more supply. And so the properties that we are repurposing, these are major sites like Karen Avenue parking lot. This is 300 units. You think of Grace Hospital, 6 acres, the number of units that can go on Grace Hospital. And then you have other pockets where we're filling in like Roseland with 48 units. Look at Palliser Park, another 48 units, a $17 million investment from the private sector. All in all today, we are seeing about $400 million of investment of approved projects and more than 400 units that have been approved by the City Hall. And there's more to go. We just launched the Low High School site. And so that is almost 5 acres of land right in the heart of the city. We know that there will be significant interest on redevelopment of that site and the others as we move along. And we've also made application to the province. Really the last thing that we can do is waive development charges. We said we're willing to waive development charges under this program for the next 3 years. We'll reduce them 70%.
Yeah.
It's amongst the top 3 cities in Ontario who've put that amount on the table to say that's how serious we are to help unlock housing. And so it has been a number one goal to create more supply and have the development community create more supply, working hand in hand with them, looking at the inventory of properties that we have and how we can make them available. And we're doing it. We're implementing the plan and it's working. It just takes time. You can't, even a 48 unit development can take more than a year to build. It just takes time. But we have not taken our foot off the gas since we started this in 2024. And we're starting to see the fruits of the labor. And we'll continue and have an open mind on what we can do to help support the development industry to build more housing that we need in our community.
Well, growth doesn't mean very much if people don't feel safe in their neighborhoods or comfortable bringing their families downtown. And you've put a lot of, let's say, political capital, city resources behind community safety and initiatives like Strengthen the Core. So what does a thriving downtown actually mean to you? What does it look like? And are the investments working?
They are working, and there's no doubt safety and security is of paramount importance. You think of the hierarchy of needs that people have. First and foremost, they want to feel safe. And you really can't do a whole lot until people feel safe. And when we look at crime stats, which we look at every single month, they're actually going down. We're actually seeing success in the crime stats, but we're still dealing with the perception of issues. And there's a commingling of mental health and addiction here that our entire continent is dealing with. There's no city across our continent that is free or immune from the effects of what we're seeing play out here. And that does layer into the conversation. But safety and security is paramount. And I go back, Lisa, I was a Windsor Police Auxiliary for 15 years. I wanted to be a police officer, and I applied a couple times, and it didn't work out for me. I was still in university, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna do something different. Once I went on one particular call, ride along as an auxiliary, and it was a life-changing sort of defining moment in my mind that I don't want to be a police officer as a career. But certainly I respect the work that they do. And so when I think of downtown, and when Ronaldo Agostino was elected to city council, he had all sorts of ideas, and there's lots of energy there. And I said, I want to work with him, and let's put together a plan that all of city council can get behind in terms of the themes in the plan, but then funding it as well. And we knew we could not just police our way out of the problems that we're seeing related to mental health and addiction, that it had to be sort of a two-pronged approach where we need more police, we need more enforcement, so the perception of safety is there for people coming downtown, for parents who want to send their kids on a bike down to the library. But at the same time, we have to be real and deal with the social side of this and offer supports to the people that are struggling with mental health and addiction issues, which we funded through Strengthen the Core. It is working really well. And half that money went to the H4. And so now we've expanded the Housing and Homelessness Health Hub at Waterworld to be a 24/7, 365 operation. There's food service there. All the suite of medical support and addiction support and counseling is on site, and all sorts of help there. It's exactly where you want folks to go who are dealing with those issues to get support. And it is working, but the problem itself is not getting better across our country. And so we collectively try and deal with these challenges that we're dealing with. But I always say, and people, you know, there's a common theme, and I agree with it, and I always say that the downtown is the heartbeat of the city. And I believe that to be true. And so that is why Strengthen the Core was meant to be downtown focused, things like green light cameras and putting together a real-time operations center with police so they can respond intelligently to different calls and they can anticipate types of behavior before crime actually happens. And that's what we're working on. And those are the things that we've invested in our downtown core. You see the amount of activity downtown now. It is absolutely incredible what's happened down there, even in the last 2 or 3 years, the rebound of activity downtown, people wanting to come because they're seeing the changes that are being made. I also acknowledge that throughout the community, whether it's in Ward 1 or Ward 7, Forest Glade, South Windsor, people still notice, and they're seeing people begging at four-way stops or at, at intersections. They're in the middle of the sort of that small little pedestrian refuge by the light. And it's discomforting when you're pulling up your car and this person's so close to your vehicle and you know what they want and the kid's in the back seat and you're just, it's a little bit uneasy for people, and I totally appreciate that. And it speaks to a broader sort of social issue that we need to reckon with as a country in terms of having supports for people and making sure they can get into housing and that they have all the supports that they need to not have to do that. But I get it, and this should not be seen as the new baseline. We should not accept this as the new baseline in our community, in our country. Help has to come, and we cannot fund the help required from your property tax dollars. And that is why it has to be centrally focused either at the federal level or the provincial level to be effective. You can't have gold-plated services in Windsor and bronze-plated services in London, because those folks will move to the communities that offer better services. And so we have to have an equalization of service delivery, but we all have to collectively acknowledge that this is not a baseline that should be accepted. And so while other levels of government are figuring this out, as they should, I've looked internally and I've said, okay, what are we going to do? City Council has been committed to building a permanent H4 site in our community and have taken every step to try and find a location. And we actually were zeroing in on one location and backed out because of some contamination in the ground that we just felt was going to be too expensive. City Council then said, look at the arena. We have H4 right next door at Waterworld. Look at repurposing the arena. Could we contain and deliver all of the services on one site? And police said, we actually like that from a policing perspective. We can be at one site. It's easier for us to manage. And so City Council said, look at the arena. So we did. We looked at the arena, but we also at the same time looked at what's working elsewhere. And we found a place in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, called Avivo Village, and it is working. So the Village at the Barn will give people an 8x8 pod for them to get off the street, and we'll take people where they're at. If they're addicted to drugs, if they have minor mental health issues, we can get them into this facility. It's a protected facility, so you can't go inside unless you actually live there. Keep the drug dealers out and sort of the unwanted influences out. But inside there, you've got a place that you can call your own. You've got the support from all of the people and the experts that want to get you back on a pathway to wellness and into your own housing. But you also have showers, you have restrooms, you have laundry facilities, so you can actually have some dignity in life while you're dealing and struggling with these other issues and not having to do some of those activities that we all have to do on the street because you have nowhere else to go.
But would it be so attractive to others, like you mentioned earlier, and coming from London, coming from Toronto, because we would have what they don't?
So we want to support the people from our community, and there is a limited number of space. There's limited dollars here, and we can't be everything to everyone. And so we're trying to have an impact in an area where we think that there is a gap. People today can go to the Mission. No one ever needs to sleep on the street in the city of Windsor. There is always a bed available for people to be off the street. And so people will go to the Mission, but then they get discharged at 8 o'clock in the morning, and until they can get back in later in the afternoon, they roam the streets. And so it's dealing with people who are in that condition and struggling with that condition, and giving those businesses a chance to succeed while trying to help the people with the conditions that they're dealing with.
So what would success look like for Village at the Barn, say 1 year later?
Yeah, so the average stay in Minneapolis, I should say the longest stay in Minneapolis, about 250 days. And so if you're not participating in active recovery, you're no longer allowed to live there. They find a pathway for you to leave. And it's not a permanent house for you to live in forever. It's a stabilization and a treatment plan to get you on a pathway to wellness. But I'll tell you that to me that the easiest indicator is trying to reduce the open air drug use that we see in the city that police are almost powerless to deal with today. We have to admit as a society that we can do better. And the city can only do so much. And Village at the Barn, we're willing to play our part. Our part will be about $20 million, and we're going to need support from the federal and provincial government for the rest of the money to renovate the barn, or if it comes back and it's too expensive to renovate, to tear it down and build something new. We're going to need the money to do that, and we can't do it alone, and we shouldn't be expected to do it alone because we are not responsible for mental health and addiction. That is a constitutional responsibility of provincial and federal government. But we want to work with them to help make the community better and to help resolve the issues that we're seeing in Windsor.
Taxes. What a word. You've made fiscal responsibility one of the defining themes of your time as mayor. The 2026 approved Windsor budget held the municipal tax levy at 0%. Critics would say a 0% tax increase sounds great politically, but that keeping taxes at zero doesn't necessarily mean that residents aren't paying more through fees or that the city's finances aren't under pressure. Is 0% sustainable?
No, you can't do 0% forever. And so let's go back, just look at this term. We've had the lowest tax increase of any city in Ontario this term. That's the record. We also, every year we get a rating from our bond rater, Standard & Poor. We have never been in better financial shape as a municipality than we are today. And I'm proud of that record. I run on that record, stand on that record.
What does that mean exactly?
That means that we have increasing reserves. We have decreased the taxpayer-funded debt in this community, and we're able to make investments like we've never made before. We have the largest, even inflation-adjusted capital budget in this city's history, which is why everyone driving around the city today is saying, oh my God, the orange cones are up. It's another construction project in the city of Windsor. All of that road work is being done. Look at Riverside Drive and the investments in the sewer infrastructure to be able to prevent basement flooding in our city. Two major and massive projects underway, and another big one coming on the west side of the city that will help the West End, part of downtown, and almost all of South Windsor. $150 million project. And so we are making massive investments. Our own bond rater shows that we are in great financial shape. And zero is not sustainable. Zero was not an election ploy. I could not have anticipated Donald Trump coming in and doing what he did. And that was the variable here. I could not anticipate what it meant when people go to the grocery store or the gas station. And filling up the Ford F-150 is very expensive today. Buying ground beef. Whoever thought ground beef would be an expensive meat? But you ask any family working in this community the price of ground beef, and they're astonished at what it costs to make hamburger helper today. That was never the way it was. And so it's incumbent upon us, and everyone knows my record. This is not some trick we pulled out of a hat. I've done zero many years over the last 12, I've done zero. But I made a commitment to keep taxes at or below the rate of inflation. And so just, look at the brochure and what I promised to do and what I've been able to deliver. Can I deliver everything in the brochure? No, some of these things, it takes longer than I could get through in one term. The fees are an important conversation because there are taxes, there are property taxes, lowest in Ontario in the city of Windsor in the last 4 years. And then there are fees. And of course, we have to adjust the fees based on what we're seeing so that the users of the services are appropriately paying and they're not putting a burden on people who aren't using the services. So anyone who owns a swimming pool in the city of Windsor today, most people will buy chlorine. Now, there's some saltwater pools, but most people will buy chlorine. The price of chlorine dramatically increased in the last few years. It's unbelievable how much it costs for a jug of chlorine today. Well, imagine running the types of facilities that we run and swimming pools we run. That is an increased expense. Who should pay for that? And that's the question council always has to grapple with. Who should pay for the increased cost of running the facilities? The tax base as a whole, or should the people who use the swimming pools actually pay a greater percentage because the costs are higher? And that's what we grapple with every year. But listen, I'm proud of the record as a city, what we've done. I haven't done it alone. I mean, this is all of City Council who's got behind it as well, saying we want to make sure we have an affordable city. We're amongst the top 15 affordable cities in our country. In our country, Lisa. And so I'm proud of that record. It means that, the people who are going out earning money, they're keeping more of it in their own pocket and deciding how to spend it. And there's another side to the equation. People who are opposed to this generally would love to tax and spend. They want to collect your tax dollars and they've got ways to spend your money that you don't really control. I have a different philosophy, and it shouldn't be a surprise after 12 years the way I view this, but I try and always act responsibly and try and meet the different needs that are out there in the community. And inevitably, when you're going through a budget exercise, it's looking at the broad spectrum of services we deliver and how do we make incremental improvements every year. And then when you look over 4 years, those incremental improvements are much higher. And if you look over 12 years, gosh, the record is really important and really good when you look even over a longer period of time. So I get it. People love to criticize that, but you know what? Can any of us have guessed what Donald Trump would have done and the uncertainty he would have put into our economy? No, I couldn't have guessed it. No one watching this could have guessed it. But we're going to respond to it. We're going to make sure that our community is resilient, that it's protected, that it's affordable, and that people have more money to spend, more money that they earn, they can choose how to spend it and not us.
We've got a lot of exciting things happening in our community. A new hospital, the new Fancy Family Hospital, something that our region debated and fought for over many years. Now we can actually see it beginning to take shape, which is very exciting. And you were convinced that Windsor-Essex needed a new acute care hospital, and you were willing to spend political capital fighting for it. But what does it mean to you to finally see the construction underway? And perhaps talk a little bit too about how transformational the hospital will be for the entire Sandwich South area.
Yeah. This goes back to 2012. And the first sort of conversation that came to City Council was sort of a nonpartisan group of a Liberal, a Conservative, an NDP thinking folks, and they came and they had a conversation about wanting to move forward with a plan to start building a new regional acute care hospital. Dwight Duncan was an MPP at the time, and he was very supportive. And there was some inertia, and at the time it just seemed like, okay, this is a planning process. I don't know what the next steps are, but of course City Council is going to be supportive of new facilities for our community. 2012, here we are 2026 with the shovel in the ground. And of course, there was a pandemic and some disruptors. Of course, everything in Windsor, I always say, there has to be a battle on anything good that happens. There's a great community discussion, and there's a tug of war and a back and forth. And that happened on this issue related to the location. And, that delayed that sort of discussion, and the appeals and all of that happened, that delayed things by a few years. And the province basically said, hey, we're going to be there. Doug Ford said to me, we'll be there for you. You guys just get your own house in order. And so when we got the house in order, we had to get all of the mayors together sort of just on the tail end of the pandemic. And we had a lunch on Erie Street. And Doug Ford came in, and we had all got together ahead of time saying, guys, we have to be united. City, county, different mayors, we're not always united on what our top priority is. But if we're going to get this done, we have to be united in front of the Premier to say that this is our priority. And so it was an interesting lunch, because the Premier came in, he says hi to everyone, and then we went around the table, and even the Mayor of Chatham was there. And as he went around the table, he says, I just want to hear what your priorities are and issues for your community. Every single one of us, including the Mayor of Chatham, said, my priority is to get the new hospital built in Windsor. It's like a goosebump moment when he was going around the table, and he finally says, okay, I give you guys, I get, you want this project to happen. I think the pandemic amplified why we're doing this. It amplified the type of resources that we have one of the oldest hospitals in all of Ontario. And so we know we can do better. And this is a proud moment, because the community comes together after the battle. Everyone says, we can't wait. It helps support our efforts politically to get the province on board. The Premier's been a great champion. And of course, everyone's seen what's happened with, try calling a plumber 10 years ago, and the price today to call a plumber, if you can get one, dramatically increased. Well, those are playing out in big capital projects as well. So this project, which was estimated to be $2 billion, is significantly higher, and the province has had to prioritize that because the Premier promised, and he's delivered on his word. And for Sandwich South, Lisa, I'll tell you, I want this to be my legacy. And people will say, I've heard it, oh, the beacon down at the riverfront, that's a legacy project. I said, legacy for who? We named it after Mike Hurst, a fine mayor in the city. Like, it's not named after me. It's part of our history on display, named after another mayor. I want my legacy to be something you'll never put my name on. And that will be the growth in Sandwich South. The hospital is a significant piece of that. But my vision and what I see in Sandwich South, and this is basically the land south of the airport between Lausanne and Walker Road, all the way to the 401. And what I see there is 5,000 plus new homes, a hospital, the university and college building a teaching and learning facility on site. Mr. Fari wants to build a hotel. He's got $800 million worth of plans right next to the hospital for residential units, but also a hotel to support the operations of the hospital. And then we have worked really hard to get a project lined up that a lot of people may not fully appreciate. They may just look at it as another road project. But when you drive down the 401 towards Toronto and you go by Lausanne Road, there's a giant blue sign the province put up saying new Cloverleaf coming. And that will open up the 401 at Lausanne. And it will provide better access for people in the county to get to the hospital. So that's good for the county residents as well. But the beautiful part of this will open up our ability to succeed long-term as a community, because we'll be able to create the largest and closest industrial park to the US-Canada border on the Canadian side.
Say that again.
The largest and closest industrial park to the US-Canada border on the Canadian side. And so people have said to me, Drew, isn't it great you've got this amazing Gordie Howe Bridge project in your backyard, $6.5 billion, many years to build, employed a lot of people, put a lot of bread on a lot of tables here locally from building materials and supplies, and it's great. But how are we lucky today, now that the Gordie Howe Bridge is open and it's direct highway-to-highway connection? You can literally drive from Miami to Montreal, and if you had enough gas and you didn't have to sleep, the only place you have to stop is for a quick check at the most efficient border crossing in North America. Right? How are we going to benefit? And so I have been pushing this for years now to move all of these projects forward that allow Lausanne and 401 to open up, that will then allow us to acquire the land to create this industrial park, which will be the long-term future success and growth for the city of Windsor. And so it is a big project, one that through the budgeting process we've started allocating dollars for. And City Council, 10-1 has been resolute in wanting to move this forward because they see the importance of getting this done. It's not just Drew. It's me helping them see why this is important, and 10 to 1, they're on board to move this forward because they understand it is the long-term future success of our city. We are blessed that we have airport land available to accept projects like Minth, $300 million investment, 1,200 jobs. We're blessed to have that, but that is going to run out. Our availability of airport land will run out because there are very few other places in Essex County. If a business came forward today and said, I need 40 acres of shovel-ready land, most municipalities in Essex County will say, sorry, I don't have it, right? And so unless the city takes a leadership role and actually does this, it means we're willing to forego development and growth to Chatham, to London, to Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky. I ain't gonna do that. I'm not gonna sit back and let that happen. So while I'm here, we're gonna fight like heck to make sure that we have a strong and stable community, that people who for many years have said, you know what, my kids have to go to Toronto for work, what jobs are you creating here, what are you attracting here? I wanna make sure that that pipeline is robust. We have some tremendous successes from the battery factory, spin-off and otherwise. We've got a couple more big ones in the pipeline that I'm really excited about. And we're going to continue to pound the pavement, but we have to have the land available. Sandwich South is that legacy for me. You'll never see my name on it 100 years from now, and no one will have any clue that I was involved with this. They won't even know who the mayor was 100 years ago. But you know what? They will benefit from having done this work today. If we don't do it, it's probably 8 to 10 years by the time we start, whenever you start. If we don't start today, we are going to be in trouble as a region 10 years from now.
It's hard to wrap your head around how long things take to complete. But you're right, planning stages are essential. Look at the Gordie Howe Bridge. Just opened after more than 2 decades of planning and waiting. How was it for you to cross it for the first time?
Oh my gosh. To me, this was I'm a Windsor guy. I've lived here my whole life. This was 25 years. This was in and around 9/11 where the conversation started, where people were saying, what happens if there's a terrorist attack on the Ambassador Bridge? It's the busiest land commercial border crossing between our two countries. A quarter of all the trade between the US and Canada crosses there. What happens? And it was a good question for one to ask. And so that led a conversation, and then there were other documents and reviews happening with respect to NAFTA and the projected increase in trade. Do we have enough road capacity in the Windsor-Essex region to help support the increase in trade? We saw big truck backups along the 401. People will remember that, or you can go back and look at the newspaper articles of the time. It was incredible. And so that helped drive a conversation. And when the Gordie Howe Bridge opened, I got a text message from former Premier Ernie Eves, and he says, Drew, it was September of 2022 that Jean Chrétien and I came down with $300 million saying, here's our first tranche of money to build a new border crossing. And so think of 25 years and all of the trials and tribulations and the conversations, and Eddie Francis with the green link flag on his car. We want a depressed roadway. We're not taking at-grade trucks through the city of Windsor and the pollution that comes with that. The fight on where the border location, where the crossing would actually be located, the roadway leading up to it, whether there was the fight about wanting to have a bike lane and a pedestrian crossing across the bridge. Every one of these battles we effectively won as a community. And we won because we stuck together. We had good political leadership helping us, but they were supported because we all stuck together and we did the work, and we hired Sam Schwartz, and we had all the experts on our side with the data to prove that it was the right solution we were asking for. And so on behalf of the community, at the time when the bridge opened, there were so many hands and people who touched this. And I was elected for 20 years of it, so I lived this very, intimately over that period of time. But on behalf of the community, when I got to stand there, when I got to walk halfway and meet the mayor of Detroit, when I drove across on opening day the first time myself with my son, it just was a proud moment because it made all of those battles, all of those meetings, all of those efforts that everyone had undertaken, it just made it feel so worthwhile when I looked at the roadway with all of the trails network and the systems that led up to this beautiful bridge. It is a beautiful bridge. And knowing we won the battle to be able to cross, as a pedestrian, we won. Like at the end of the day, we won the lottery on this. And it's a great project that will outlive me and my kids and my grandkids. It'll be here for a long, long time, and we should all be incredibly proud of our efforts.
There's been a lot of talk, Drew, about strong mayor powers, and you've faced a lot of criticism for your use of the powers, including a controversial veto to end the tunnel bus service between Windsor and Detroit. Has the expansion of the mayor's powers made Windsor government more effective, or has it concentrated too much power in one office?
Well, I think people will debate that particular question. I can always tell you, I can just speak for myself. I have always exercised these powers, which are basically changes to the Municipal Act. It's just the new law on how municipalities are governed. I've always used them prudently and in consultation with City Council. And so when it came to employment matters, I consulted with City Council on some of the high profile terminations. We had these discussions. Organizational changes that we made. I brought City Council in one by one saying, here's what we're planning on doing. Do you have any feedback or ideas? Are you okay with this? Every single one of them came in, every single one had the conversation, not one of them ever said they have a problem with it. And there were no surprises when it happened. They were part of the process and part of the discussion before that ever happened. The reality is the province changed the legislation that governs municipalities. That's what they did. And so now I have an obligation as mayor to present a budget to City Council on or before February the 1st. But if you actually look at the mechanics of how the budget is prepared, I have 5 people working in my office. None of them are finance experts. We still have a whole finance team on a floor below me that has to prepare a $1.2 billion budget. They still have to do all of that work. I still meet today like I did before with every member of City Council saying, tell me what projects are important for you. What do you need to see in this budget? And I try and, like I've always done, move the shells around to make sure that I can slide something that's important for city councilors into the budget. And at the end of the day, when it comes to City Council, they can see their own efforts reflected in the document that we're going to discuss. Then they can change it as they want to change it. The one issue with the tunnel bus, you can always count on me to protect the taxpayers in the City of Windsor. And this was a decision that I just couldn't get my mind around letting continue. And I thought for a couple reasons. Let me back up. The federal government changed the legislation with respect to paid sick days and for federally regulated employees. Our transit system was federally regulated only because we operated the tunnel bus service. And so those 10 paid sick days to employees didn't just cover the 6 or 7 people who operated the tunnel bus. It applied to over 200 other employees who never even went to the United States because the whole organization is federally regulated. The question was, what does that cost you and I as taxpayers? We thought it was going to cost $1.5 million. And so I thought I was saving $1.5 million. What we found out after the fact, after we ran it for 1 year, it was $2.5 million of expense because the employees were taking on average 8.8 sick days of the 10. They basically had 8.8 days more off a year that you and I were paying for. And so the decision at the time was to save $1.5 million, which ended up being $2.5 million, right? And City Council, trying to act reasonably in the situation, tried to increase and suggested increasing the toll rate on the tunnel bus from $10 a person each way to $20 a person each way. And as a guy in Windsor who's lived here my whole life, I'm like, no one's going to take the tunnel bus at $20 a person each way. It's going to be, I appreciate what they're doing, but this is just going to put us in more of a hole because our ridership is going to decrease dramatically. And so in the best interest of taxpayers, I said, I am going to veto this decision. Council then has the ability to override that veto. And when the vote came on the override of the veto, they didn't have enough votes. In fact, one of the people that voted against the decision in the beginning actually supported me. They came on board and said, you know what, you're actually right. You're actually right. And since that time, members of council who were opposed at the time have acknowledged that it was the right decision. So judge me on the outcomes. And I am happy to be accountable to the taxpayer for the outcomes of the decisions I've made. Again, I go back to that one budget decision. Look at what happened here and how much money we saved, and the private sector stepped in as delivering the service cheaper than City Council was going to charge, and they're making money doing it. So I think it's the right decision. But all of the rest of those decisions, City Council was consulted every single time.
Last year, Mayor Dilkens, you faced criticism for a decision of the Corporation of the City of Windsor to hire your wife, Jane, to work for the city's Parks Department. And I think it led some residents to question whether staff would feel some pressure, indirectly perhaps, to hire your spouse. Other residents felt that the optics were just poor, regardless of whether or not procedures were followed. So looking back, do you understand the critics? Do you understand the concern? And would you have handled anything differently?
Yeah, I totally understand the perception of the decision based on everything you just said. And even the layer of the strong mayor powers where people, don't even know that wouldn't have applied in this situation because she was at a level below the level of manager. Strong mayor powers don't apply. But, I support my wife. She's extremely qualified as a project manager, brings over 25 years experience, and she was applying for jobs throughout the city of Windsor proper, but also the jobs that came up within the city of Windsor for which her skills were appropriate. She applied to 2 positions as a project manager, didn't even get an interview. But I get it. I get the perception of how people would look at this and think that there's some inside ball, when in fact there was no inside ball whatsoever. Trying to be a supportive husband for my wife, applying for a job when I come home, but when I go to work, completely detached and not even part of the process in any way, shape, or form. But, the perception is difficult to overcome. I was happy that the Integrity Commissioner was asked to review this. And as part of his review, he even hired a third-party fairness advisor, another lawyer, to partner with him to make sure that it was ultra fair and there was a separate set of eyes doing the work. And so he interviewed every person who was involved in the hiring process. He interviewed senior people in the HR department to understand the process. He interviewed the chief administrative officer to understand the corporate processes. And then he came to me at the very end, and I had to provide sworn testimony under oath about this.
It just seems like it's a lot to go through. I mean, was it worth doing in the first place? You had to know that there would be criticism. You had to know that the optics were going to be there. I mean, personally, I was thinking, why not apply for another job, Jane, that isn't within the city?
So she did. She applied for many throughout the city of Windsor proper, not the corporation of the city. And she was applying, and ultimately, I trust the processes of the city. And that's what the report of the Integrity Commissioner came back and said, that all of the processes were followed, that the mayor had no involvement directly or indirectly with the hiring of his wife. And nor do I today. I'm completely disconnected. She works at a different location. And we've made sure that there are internal separations that, I get the perception though, but there are internal separations that, protect to make sure that the integrity of the process, but in terms of her work stream, are separate and distinct and that I have no influence whatsoever.
There have been, speaking of optics, there have been instances over the last few years of a few staff members being dismissed from City Hall with accusations following that it was just you acted alone in those decisions, and that there is a top-down hierarchy now at Windsor City Hall that's based on keeping leadership happy. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's nonsense. But listen, I get that the conversation is out there, so let me explain this. With respect to one of the 2 positions that you're referencing here, I actually went in camera to City Council because City Council individually, the councillors were complaining about one individual, so much so that I said, I need to have a discussion about this. Like, we need a well-functioning senior team at the City of Windsor to deliver for the residents. So we need to put all of this on the table. We spent more than an hour, every councillor going around talking about the problems that they perceived and having a thorough discussion. Ultimately, the decision and responsibility comes down to me to make the decision, but they saw all of the issues and knew that this was likely not a recoverable position. And so I made that decision after going to City Council. The other decision as well, I brought City Councillors into my office. We had thorough conversations about what the plan was and what the issues were. And so we all had an opportunity to have the discussion and put everything on the table so that they understood that they could express their concerns, but they also understood that we need a well-functioning senior team to deliver. I don't think I've had, or we've had as a city, a better functioning corporate leadership team, a group of commissioners responsible for all the departments than we have today. We actually have a well-functioning team. And so I get it. Again, it goes to perception. You know, strong mayor powers, the mayor can make every decision. Yeah, I could have done those things unilaterally without consulting with council. It's not what I did. I went to council before making any changes and had the conversation with them, and it's well documented.
There is a rumor out there that over the last couple of years, while serving as mayor, that you had put your name forward for a few other top jobs in the city, even though that would have meant stepping away from your position as mayor. So what do you want people to know about that?
Well, when you start off with rumor, it's actually interesting because you wouldn't believe what I hear. You know, people coming to me saying, "Oh, I hear you're going to be the next CEO of Stellantis in Canada." I said, "What? Where is that coming from?" Everyone has an idea of where I'm going. When David Moucher was leaving, they're like, "Oh, you're going to be the next CEO of the hospital." I actually had one member of the police board call me and congratulate me, and I said, "For what?" "Well, you're going to be the next CEO of the hospital." I said, "Well, that's funny. I've never applied." Nor did I. And so when it comes to looking at the city, I was approached by a group of folks involved with St. Clair College, asking me to have a conversation when Patty France announced her retirement. And you'll recall that Patty's retirement was basically announced 2 or 3 years in advance. It was quite a long runway. And so Patty had asked me to sit on the replacement interview committee. And so I was part of the interview panel going to interview candidates. And I was asked if I would consider putting my name forward to have a conversation. And I did. I did have that conversation. And it would have meant leaving the mayor's chair in the third term sort of halfway through. And the connection that I saw at that particular time related to what I deal with in almost every meeting with developers as mayor. It used to be, how can we get electricity rates down? That was sort of the central theme in Ontario at the time. People don't even talk about that anymore. What they talk about now is prove that you have the talent for my business to be successful if we locate in Windsor. And so it's all about the war on talent. And the conversation was interesting to me because it would have meant basically a 10-year commitment. And it was all about making sure the community could still succeed by having the talent available that St. Clair College produces. And so, again, I had the conversation. I did not get the job. I think the right thing happened.
Did you want the job?
I was interested. I was interested in when I was approached, and I never went looking for it. I was approached by 3 different people to have this conversation. And when the first person approached me, I thought, oh, it's just, one person. And the second one, I'm like, well, am I being, like what's going on? And then the third person, it was like triangulation. But I was happy to have the conversation because I was looking, saying, you know what, getting out of the mayor's office at some point will be a requirement. You can't have this job forever. And how can I continue to give to the community in a meaningful way that is compatible with the work that I've done, the stuff that I understand, and actually help deliver on the pipeline to make sure the city is successful. I saw it as a natural fit in terms of a compatible move and a transition. I love St. Clair College. I don't hold any grudges. I want them to succeed. They have my support on almost everything that they do. I want to be there to be supportive of them. So it's not a matter of animosity or ill will or anything like that. They made a decision they thought was best for their organization. I respect it. But I was interested in the conversation and I had it.
Well, let's get a little more personal now because you have had some scary, some sad moments over this last term as mayor that you have shared with the public. Your father, Ted Dilkens, passed away December 2023. And in 2025, you dealt with a prostate cancer diagnosis. What was it like to deal with these very personal times and moments in your life as a very public person?
Yeah, I mean, the death of a parent's never easy. Thankfully, when my dad went to long-term care, he didn't last very long in long-term care. He was ill. I mean, he was there for me every step of the way. So that was a loss, and a loss that we all have to go through at some point in our life. But it's a transition, not, being able to pick up the phone or have a call or him stopping by. And then, the cancer thing was actually quite a shock to me. And, under regular screening, and we saw the number going up in terms of prostate cancer. And finally the doctor said, okay, like, you got to do something here. And now is the time for you to do something, because your outcome will be the strongest if you have intervention now. So I went through it. It was tough. It was unpleasant, I would put it that way. But because I did it early, I got rid of the cancer. Like, it was as simple as, thank God it was contained inside of the prostate. When they remove the prostate, they remove the cancer. All the numbers are great, and it's like I never had cancer. I'm a guy who never had cancer. I'm just incredibly lucky. I feel so fortunate, because when I go out in the community, and because I was public about this, I'm like, I can't go to Best Buy. If I go to Best Buy, I guarantee there's a 50% chance some guy at Best Buy is going to come up to me and say, by the way, I'm dealing, or I had the same thing you had, or the conversation will naturally gravitate with a bunch of strangers to prostate cancer. And so that's been an interesting experience, but I'll tell you, it makes me feel very lucky, because I'm cancer free and it all worked out great. I'm hearing a lot of stories from people who aren't as fortunate as me.
So what has this job cost you personally? What do you wish people understood about the job that they don't?
Well, I think people see you in a council meeting. People will see you, out at a community event, but they don't necessarily see everything else that happens. I mean, being the mayor, in many ways, it takes over your whole life. It becomes, you can't go anywhere to any party without everyone wanting to talk about city business. And so you get used to it. Like any job, you get used to that. There is the downside of social media and the death by 1,000 cuts, and people sort of, not wanting to understand the truth, or actually the worst, wanting to deliberately put out a false narrative designed to create a media story or a buzz, or, the nonsense side of it. But generally speaking, when I go to Costco or Walmart or the grocery store, people are good. People are like me. They care about the city. They want to see it, improve. They know everything's not perfect. Gosh, the person in your seat 100 years from now and the one in my seat 100 years from now, the city's never going to be perfect. We're going to be, we're going to be continuous improvement. And so, but they see things getting better. They see the growth as a community, and they don't always appreciate what goes in to actually doing the job well. This is more, I've always taken this job as more than being a ribbon cutting mayor. I'm not interested in that side of it, quite honestly. It's a necessary part of it, but that's my least favorite part of it, is cutting the ribbon. It's actually doing the work and seeing the successes that we're seeing as a community. And they're unquestionable. When you look at the battery factory, all of the supply chain, the hospital shovel in the ground, the bridge opening, and everything else that we're working on, this is not, this isn't make-believe. Like, people can see the tangible results. That's taken a lot of work by me, but also by a whole team of people to realize those efforts, and it's exciting to see the outcomes.
The future is bright.
It really is. I've always said, and Jim Morrison laughs at me because I say I've never been more optimistic about the future of my community than I am today, and it's so genuine. Just look around. Look at where we were at 15 years ago, and look where we're at today. And in so many ways, the growth has been remarkable. The investment has been remarkable. The change has been positive and remarkable. And we'll continue to deal with those difficult things like mental health and addiction. Those aren't being ignored. We're dealing with them. But you can't put everything there. You've got to continue to look at how you're going to grow the community and set it on a pathway for future success. And that's where I like to spend most of my time, because that's where we're going to have the biggest outcome and the biggest benefit for the most number of people.
So are you going to run again?
Well, I didn't anticipate that question. Listen, I love what I do. And, despite some of the frustrating parts of the job, whether it's social media or people, who are always nipping at your heels trying to take you down, stay above that. Like, we are on the right track. I believe the future is so bright for the community.
And stay tuned. There's more information to come, but I continue to be incredibly optimistic about our future.
How did I know you were going to say that? Well, this was fun.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. This was a good conversation.
Yeah, great talking to you today.
Nice to see you as well.
I miss talking to you on the air.
I know.
Yeah, that was a weekly thing.